get from China. So we also end up buying large quantity from China. But I think at some stage, the government should put together a package. Like in automobile, you have ancillary units. Similarly, for renewable, you need to, especially solar, you need to have ancillary units where someone will just manufacture the panels, someone will get the wafers, someone will do the glass sheets, so and someone will do the structure. So, you need to create the ecosystem for making this happen. And the government intervention in this will be very, very critical if they want to do it on a long-term basis, whereby they need to protect the Indian industry if they want to go and demonstrate that India can manufacture large quantity of solar panels to meet its own requirement. So I think that there is a great opportunity on this. I just want to also touch upon some of the issues that Shalini mentioned, especially in the rural area, and how we can, because this is an area that we work. First of all, it's a very difficult business model, and these business models cannot be working on CSR fund. We have tried this earlier, and we said we will do it through CSR funding. We can do 100 of them, 200 of them, 500 of them, but that's it. It will, beyond a certain stage, not scale up to the extent it is required. India has 600,000 villages. There are nearly 200,000 villages which have more than 500 homes, so that there are nearly 2,000 people staying in each of these villages. And there is definitely an opportunity. In fact, when we went to develop the microgrids over there, we found that the microgrid is actually turning into a secondary business, and the primary business is the micro enterprise development, because the consumption of energy in the villages is very small. It's per month is 8 units, in a year is 100 units. And I don't think by any stretch of imagination we'll be able to become whatever is the country average today of 1,100 or 1,200, or the Chinese average and things like that. So that sort of consumption pattern will not happen in the villages, at least in the near future. So how do you generate consumption? And for that, the micro enterprises, whether for irrigation purpose, you can give it to the farmers and ensure that they not only use water for their farmlands, but also for the neighboring farmlands also. And the model that we said that within 3 kilometer or 5 kilometer radius, they can distribute water and not electricity. So that's one of the model. We said, can you do a flour mill? Everyone requires to eat, and atta chakki is something which is very common. You can do value additions in all these places. Mustard is grown in large quantity. So can you use oil expeller over there? So there are a number of activities that can be done over there, but you need to create. So you end up creating the infrastructure for that. You go and tie up with equipment manufacturers who can do it. You typically would like that there should be energy efficient equipments that they should manufacture. You go and tie up with financing companies, with insurance companies. You also end up working with some of the other developers who can come and support the farmers in terms of what sort of input they should use, what sort of nutrients they should use. So I think there is a huge opportunity, but I think the money is not there. And, Shalini mentioned about affordability. How do you, in 99 rupees, give them 2 bulb, 1 fan, and 1 mobile charging? Or if they want a TV, also give them at 150 rupees. The Gram Kutir Yojana or Kutir Jyoti Yojana. So all those are at a very, very low cost. And though, of course, the government provides all that supply, but they supply intermittently. As a private entity, people will expect a good quality service from you. And how do you make it affordable? How do you make it commercially viable? Because if it's not viable, you cannot scale up. You cannot do 10,000, 20,000, 50,000. And India needs that. India definitely needs that sort of a solution.
Let me bring Dr. Saran in on that question, because I mean, this is an area that, we're saying two different things, right? So in some cases, big industry saying, protect us, there's let's have subsidies or let's make Chinese goods more expensive. We know that anytime you have anything to do with trade wars, it's actually the common person that ends up paying, right? This is what's always been wrong about Trump's policies on trade. It's actually his consumer that ends up paying. And the same is true here, right? I mean, if we are going to try and both create these mini grids and so forth, but we're increasing the input cost of all of them, especially in the short term, it is the common person that will have to pay more. So, Dr. Saran, how does that sit with you? And then perhaps you can also speak a little bit about energy efficiency. Whenever you talk to power producers, energy efficiency isn't necessarily top of their mind, but what's the role of energy efficiency here?
Yeah, I'll break it up into two parts. And thanks, Praveer, for bringing that up, because this is an area that I feel very strongly about and concerned that we don't go back to the old ways of working. Market viability is absolutely important, and therefore it is not just the CSR, but it is the collaboration between the corporates, the foundation, so the development sector, corporates, and the government who have to come together. And subsidies can be an answer only for a short term, because subsidies kill the market, and we've seen that in the past as well. So we cannot rely on subsidies for too long. We have to create demand. And I think for the first time, at least I see a light at the end of this tunnel. I see an opportunity with the migrant workers going back and the demand balance shifting a little bit. And therefore, what you are talking about, local produce, local flour mills, value-added services, food processing, cold storage, milk products, they need cold storage, they need refrigeration. I mean, I think for the first time, I see that the demand in our suburban or rural areas is shifting. And this is an opportunity that needs collaboration of this entire ecosystem that Praveer just mentioned. It's not just with affordable products that we will be able to get that. And I take your point, Sumant, on, for some time, we will have more expensive products because we cannot get the economies of scale like that China can get. But I'm not touching upon that topic right now. It is the access, it is the demand, it is new businesses emerging. Did we ever imagine the internet use and the penetration in the rural India, which is as much as it is today? I believe it's not just the Delhi schools which are using internet for learning, but it has also gone down to our villages. So because of the demand, because of our investment in the rural and the suburban areas, providing the product, the access, the affordable, the financing support, and the market linkages which will be there. I'm talking about self-sufficiency. A village which generates its own power, which charges its own e-rickshaws, which creates its own mills for their own consumption, flour mills, and also has the ability to export to other states the processed food or milk products that they produce. I'm talking about all that support through the ecosystem partnership.
And we're going to come back to that again. I just do want to ask Raman also his views on this idea of Make in India and what that means for some of his short-term, medium-term economics. And then let's shift also to, this is a policy reset opportunity, right? There does seem to be an appetite for that. What's working for you as big developers and also as entrepreneurs in this space? And what do you think are things that really the government should now focus on as it's sort of thinking about a policy reset and also obviously thinking about a fiscal stimulus? So Raman, maybe starting with you, firstly, do answer that question of what do you think about this Make in India? And are those the kind of short-term costs you want to absorb?
Sure. And, the question we've asked is, how can you compete with China? Because why do you want to have a subsidy and begin a journey when you know you won't be competitive and maybe you can't build a global leadership role in manufacturing? So how do you match, how do you equal China's might in manufacturing, given you have a 450 gigawatt opportunity? And I think it comes down to scale. and building an ecosystem, and then having the patience for 3 or 4 years to do that. And that's the fundamental question that we don't have an answer to, that why with 400 or 500 gigawatts of demand in a short term. I mean, when you talk about building manufacturing industries, 10 years is a short term. And you have virtually certain demand. There's a track record, as someone said, it's the lowest cost source of power now. We're now on the big boys table. So the question is, how do you double down and commit to a 10-year plan that allows us to be not just, competitive, but really occupy the global leadership role that we should?
Mm.
So I don't have a specific answer to that. We've thought about this a lot, and I don't want to take up too much time. We have ideas on it, but I think it does have to happen in coordination with the government. It would take more than one agency, which often adds complexity, because exactly how it's happened in China. It's a package of financing incentives, innovation incentives, it's ecosystems of glass suppliers and backsheet suppliers and polysilicon purifiers, et cetera, that come together that create this tremendous resilience. And they're battle scarred. They've gone up and down again and again. How do we match that? That's the question, right? But you don't want to, my feeling is you don't want to enter this without a 10-year plan where you can be competitive. So that's on manufacturing. But as someone said, it's about $300 billion in terms of the opportunity for 50 gigs. We already do about 100, 125 of that in India, right? So the question is, can the government commit to bringing in the balance 150, 175 worth of manufacturing potential over the next 10 years, 10 to 15 gigs a year. In terms of what's worked well, again, I take my hat off, because we've done this concept called solar parks in India, and I think 50 have now been planned, 12 are operational. And look, nothing is perfect. These are thousands, many thousands of acres of land in remote parts of India. Nothing's perfect, but it works pretty well. And I'm sure every developer would agree this is one of the harder things to do. To aggregate thousands and thousands of acres of land is not a simple thing to do. So to have that kind of momentum, I don't know of any other company, of any other country in the world that has been so pioneering in providing land and grid services at this scale and with this momentum. 12 are done. We're already on 3 of them, and we hope to be on more. 50 are planned. More of those would be great. It would just provide that infrastructure package on the site, which developers could then be attracted to. Then it's the grid, and we know many tens of thousands of crores have been spent after many years of planning the green corridor to connect the big sunshine belts and the big wind corridors to our big cities, our metros, and our industrial areas. That's going well. We're going to really need to double down on that, because we're still on the tens of gigawatt scale, right? And we're going to go into hundreds of gigawatt scale. So it's great work, but we're just getting started. So how we continue to do that, continue to keep the momentum that's already been developed, would be very important. Already you look at the progress in terms of the contract, the power purchase agreement contract, the termination compensation clauses, the payment security guarantees. So making sure those are fully funded, et cetera, attracts international investors. Because again, $300-400 billion to be spent, not just in terms of the CapEx, but in terms of the manufacturing you're going to set up to meet that CapEx. If you have an internationally bankable contract, as we've shown that we can do, you'll attract international finance. Why should domestic lenders be the only ones to have to finance that? And that's already happening. I'm sure almost all of us who are solar developers are using access to both Indian and non-Indian sources of capital. So why not attract more international investment into India? So that's on the land, the grid, and the contract, which are the 3 enablers that then allow the manufacturers and the global investors to come in and be a part of this 400 or 500 gigawatt journey. In terms of specific things that I would ask the government, one of the things is there is a new Electricity Act coming out. There's been talk about this is to do with coordination between agencies. So between the time you win an auction and you celebrate to the time you have a fully enforceable PPA, power purchase contract, which lasts for 25 years, there are 4 or 5 steps, which involve states, it involves different jurisdictions. Sometimes there's a slip here or there. Sometimes it's a deliberate slip by one of the actors, no pointing fingers. But what would help this coordination, and it's something that's being thought through and it's something that we would support, is this idea of the Electricity Contracts Enforcement Authority that would help bring the states and the central agencies together. And when you have a dispute resolution mechanism, you often find you have fewer disputes. So I think that this would be a great authority to launch alongside the CEA, the Central Electricity Authority, CERC, and the alphabet soup of the other agencies. That's one. And then, as I said, around the grid, there's a waiver on interstate transmission. I would keep that because, as we said, the big sunny areas are sometimes dislocated from the big manufacturing areas, etc. So I would ask that we keep that post 2022. But those are some specifics on a broader scheme of, I think, a job tremendously well done. These are hard things to do in remote parts of India, and to execute at this scale. So phenomenal momentum by the government of India. I just say when you go from tens of gigawatts to hundreds, you got to just double down and keep doing it.
And Sumant, would you agree with that set of priorities, or would you add anything when you think about a message to government as they're thinking about the reset? Hi, could you guys hear me?
Yes, very well.
I think we might have. I think Sumant's screen is frozen. Let me. I was going to ask Pravir the same question. As you think about what the message you would give to government in terms of their fiscal stimulus and a potential reset, even in some of these policies, that appetite seems to be there. So, do you agree with Raman's priorities? Are there additional ones you'd place on that?
Absolutely agree with Raman. These are the standard documents that we have. So all guys who are working in power companies, they continuously repeat the same thing with whomsoever they meet in the government. So these are things that has been troubling the power sector for many years, and all of us have articulated this in some platform or the other, in some way or the other, to the government. Unfortunately, the government has its own pace of doing things, but still things happen. It takes sometimes a little more time than it should. But I think these are the things that the government has to take. It's part of the agenda of the government, and I'm sure sooner than later, many of these will get implemented.
Well, then let me ask you a slightly different question. We've talked about that the government had set a pretty bold agenda, and it's already, with respect to renewables or green energy, and it's already starting to achieve that earlier than expected. The question I have is, does the COVID crisis and the fact that there is a big call now for major public investments, and there's also a huge recognition of the role that clean energy plays just in our own general experience and health. People are suddenly experiencing clean air. Is there an opportunity to get together and say we can go from bold to even bolder? Is there another inflection point in the kind of targets that the country can set? And from the perspective, from your perspective as people in the industry, and are those achievable? Right. So look at today's targets. Would you be able to double or triple those? And is that called for?
We need to understand that power is a concurrent subject. There is a plan that Government of India makes, but the implementation of the plan is done by the state discoms and the state governments. Now, I'm not sure that whether the state governments and all the state governments, the 30 of them now, and the state discoms, they are on the same page as far as the Government of India is concerned. So there is a huge gap, and until and unless the type of reforms which is required to happen in the state government, state discom, that does not happen, many of these will aspirationally very good and should happen, may not be possible to meet the target. So I think until and unless the reform that is supposed to happen in the state discoms, that does not take place, they have the ability to buy power and pay for it. They have the ability to have increased the demand, because it's not that the demand is not there. Even last year, the peak in summer was 180 gigawatt. It's not that the peak in the country is 180 gigawatt. If possibly there was no restriction, it would have gone to maybe 220, 230. So there is a huge pent-up demand which is there. And until and unless the discoms are in a position and they have the money with them and the wherewithal to buy that power and pay for it, this sort of change will not happen. And I think that the government is looking at bringing the new Electricity Act with amendments. Possibly some of those aspects might get covered, but there's huge amount of work that the government has to do. And when I say government, it's not government of India, but it's more the state governments who have to fall in line. The cumulative losses of all these state discoms put together every year is more than $10 billion, and it gets added every year. So until and unless the fundamental change will not happen in the power sector, these numbers, while they look very good and we will possibly reach 50 or 70% of the target, we'll never be able to reach the full target until unless everyone comes on the same page and they are committed to meeting the targets that have been set by the government.
And Sumant, are you able to hear us now? We lost you earlier.
Yeah, the light went out.
Okay, that's ironic.
It happens pretty often.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard most of that, but I guess we are talking about what are those priorities that you see that government could be thinking about in this COVID recovery. So both from a policy perspective, but also in the sort of the fiscal stimulus. And does it also mean that this is an opportunity to leverage to say, okay, there's already bold targets out there, but can we even go for another level of scale? And I'm trying to bring a few of those things together because we're talking about competing against China. A domestic market that's even a higher scale is going to help on that front. And the other thing I would love you to also talk about is innovation. So scale is one thing, but where's the opportunity for us to also innovate our way out of this? You guys have recently set up a 24-hour pure solar project, if I'm not mistaken. You know, these kind of things are like right on the cutting edge of what's possible through renewables. So what's the role also of the Indian industry in also just innovating in this space as well? And does the post-COVID economic recovery provide us a sort of an opportunity to push for something like that?
Okay, well, there are two very separate and different questions in that. So let me try to answer them. So first question being, what can the Indian government do? So I think the government is already doing quite a few things. I think the key issue in our sector is, as Praveer said, DISCOM financial health. And that's something that passes its way back into the entire value chain. So DISCOMs have to be fixed. And I think if that part of the overall value chain is fixed, then I think really there's nothing else that in some ways needs to be done. Everything else seems to be working reasonably well. Of course, we have a regulatory system that also does not work too well. So that, concurrently can also get fixed along with it. And the Electricity Act amendments that the government is just about to, or has introduced now, a lot of these things are sought to be addressed. So hopefully, these issues will get resolved at some point in the near future. Also, if you recall, the finance minister announced this program of 90,000 crores yesterday, and linked to that is an improvement by the DISCOMs that they have to promise to undertake. Now, they have made these promises in the past as well and not kept them. So let's see whether it is in fact more effective this time. But meanwhile, I think we can all do with the 90,000 crores. So let's get that into the system as well. So I think that really is what needs to be done. I think DISCOM reform and use the levers of the central government's disposal, the Electricity Act, the funding, to try to push through some of these reforms with the
Did we have another electricity outage? I think we might have.
So it had
Bijli
gone
Ka Yogi.
back.
The power guy had an outage.
Well, I think this is a good segue to you, Dr. Saran, because that's the common person's experience. I think it would be good to. Are we back?
If you agree, I'll come on the innovation part of it. And
please do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That huge amount of work that is going. We have ourselves been involved along with Tata Trust, Department of Science and Technology, and also Niti Aayog, to set up something known as the Clean Energy International Incubation Hub, which is in Delhi. We have right now, I think, 25 startups who are working. And I can tell you that some of the things that they are doing is absolutely fantastic work. Simple thing, a small ceiling fan we wanted for the village, which should be able to be the most efficient fan. The best ones that were there in India were 50 watt. The ones which are the normal that you get in the market is 80 watt. These kids made a 20 watt fan, a 20 watt TV. So there's huge amount of work in smart metering and all that is going. And many of them actually are now good to go to the market and used not only in India, but also in other developing countries. So there's huge amount of work that is being promoted, but more can be done. And I think there is a great opportunity because the distributed generation and some of the new solutions which are coming in terms of hybrid solutions and all that were never tried earlier. And in the Indian context, everything is very different. You know, India, we wanted to do the storage system. 45, 47 degrees normal in the Indian villages. Now, most of the batteries beyond 40 degrees, they are not able to operate. Their life goes down by 50%. And when we started using it, we realized that the life of the battery instead of 10 years has become 3 years. So a lot of work that needs to be done, which is happening, but more would be welcome and more would be at the time.
Thanks for sharing that. Dr. Saran, you were also going to come in, I think, on a similar.
Yeah. And you know, this is exactly the kind of work that we need to do, like Social Alpha by Tata Trust that Praveer was just talking about. And I didn't touch upon the energy efficiency question that you asked me previously. Frankly, I'm concerned about that a lot, though we all realize that we can generate or produce as much energy as we want, but the demand keeps increasing and the number of gadgets that we have are increasing, and therefore we will never be able to keep pace, even with renewables, with that kind of demand. I hope that COVID has given us some realization and frugality and conservation becomes a mantra. But as you would know, that all the sensors and smart devices, as we call them, which are more energy efficient, are a little bit more expensive than the regular ones. And whether it's the Saint-Gobain's glass or the controls or whatever else that we talk about, I anticipate that there will be a dip before we see the the spike again, because though there is realization, the reality is that where is the money? And that's going to be a big challenge. And I don't know how it will play out.
No, I think thanks for covering that. And I'm just going to give one quick last word to Sumant, because I know we keep losing him and I keep breaking his flow. So Sumant, are you back on? And did you want to just finish that last thought that you had?
Yeah, sorry, I'm back. You know, the light goes and then the internet drops and then it comes back and then again, so it's very irritating. No, the point I was making on the innovation front, which is the second question that he'd asked me, was that, unlike Praveer, who has a bit more of a consumer mindset perhaps because of his background in the Discom side, my focus is a little bit more on the generation side. And there are two clear areas of innovation that I see. One clearly is the area of digital that potentially allows us to see the performance of our machines and our solar farms better and get more out of it. So I think that's one big area. And the second big area is in how to firm up renewable energy at the lowest possible cost. And the more you can firm it up, the more you are likely to be able to compete with the firmer sources of power such as coal and so on. And so I think a lot of work needs to happen in that area as well, and is happening right now. And I think, I think that's the direction in which we're going to go.
Great, thanks. And I don't know if it is, sorry, was someone just trying to come in? Okay, if not, because we have to switch between panels, we're going to have to close this panel now. So I won't go through any of the further questions. We did try and cover many of the questions that people who are listening in were asking. So that's how I'd sort of frame the question. But I guess to summarize, I would say there's this big question that's always been there about jobs versus sustainability versus access versus the overall, this is how much we need to generate in the country to meet our sort of GDP needs. And there's been a sense that that's been a divergent question, that jobs may lie over here, sustainability may lie over there, access actually may lie in a completely different place. I think what we heard today was not just because of COVID, but because of many factors that have already been bubbling for the last 10 years. But the real sort of realization that any big investment that happens from here on in should be in the green space, because the green space is no longer a compromise. It's both delivering affordable energy at scale, but also a great source for future jobs. And there is a huge awakening in the country on the need for sustainability, which is one of the topics we'll talk about later in one of the upcoming panels. So it was fantastic for us to sort of hear that from what I would call the horse's mouths, people who are in the industry, either as entrepreneurs or working with in mini grids, right up to big renewable energy and conventional players. So we're very fortunate to have had all four of you join us for this panel. And I think the audience is being streamed both on YouTube and on Zoom. So we've got a pretty large audience to listen in. Thank you so much for joining. And if you have a chance to stay, in the next minute or two, we will transition to the next panel, where actually we have 10 entrepreneurs in the energy space who are going to, in the clean energy space, who are going to simply each speak for 5 minutes to talk about their idea and what they're promoting. And it's just a great way to get a very quick fire, rapid fire sense of some of the great innovations that are happening in India around the space. So if you are able to stay, please do. I don't know if there's a way to give a round of applause on Zoom. I'm still very confused by the terminology. We keep having fireside chats without a fire, so I don't really know how to do any of this. But if there was an audience, it would be a very loud applause. So thank you all for joining us. And what I will do now is turn it over to my colleagues to take us into the next panel, which will start in about 2-3 minutes. So for those who have joined this panel, please stay on. And we'll be starting the next panel in 2 minutes. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Matashi, are you on right now?
Yeah, I can unmute. I've unmuted myself now.
Great. So I'm going to jump directly to you. So if you could put on your, great. Put on your camera.
Is this okay?
I think we can't see your full face. Perhaps move down. Yes, great.
Better? All right.
Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Great, great.
Just going to start in another minute.
So just a second, just one question. We have 6 presentations, right?
6 presentations, yes.
Okay, because Gaurav mentioned 10 again. So I was just...
No, there's 6. Do you have the order?
Yes. So for the presenters who are already logged in, I have Mr. Matin Abdul as the first presenter, Mr. Kushagra Srivastav second, Mr. Balram Bhardwaj third, Mr. Rakesh as fourth, Ms. Abhilasha as fifth, and Andrew Mears as the sixth. Is that correct?
Sounds perfect, yes.
All right.
I think Bhardwaj hasn't joined, but hopefully he'll join by the time his presentation is up.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, I think we can start now.
All right.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Clean Energy Innovation Spotlights. This session has a very interesting format. We've selected 6 organizations to present innovations related to clean energy. These are interactive highlights, so please feel free to send in your questions. I'm now going to hand this session over to the moderator. Matashi Sengupta is the India Office Director at MacArthur Foundation. Matashi, over to you.
Thank you so much. So a warm welcome to all the participants here. This is, as Nargesh mentioned, this is a different format. We are looking at innovations that can be easily upscaled or looked at as we move, try to find ways and solutions out of the COVID crisis that we are currently surfacing. And as a result of which, there's been a fair amount of cautiousness and questions as to how would one look at finding energy efficient and at the same time environment friendly solutions to the economic crisis that currently is on all of us. So as funders, we have all been trying to figure out ways by which we can take this forward. And today, in fact, this particular session is looking at presenting some of the solutions which are already out there in the market. They are at different stages of testing, and also many of them have actually gone online as well. And what we're going to do over the next few minutes is to hear from each of the 6 presenters that have come on board. So I have with me Mr. Martin Abdul from Grassroots Energy. I would like you to just wave your hand if possible. And then I have got Mr. Kushagra Srivastav on the line. Then I will have Mr. Balram Bhardwaj, who heads Maclec Consulting. And then I've got Mr. Rakesh, I've got Abhilasha Parwar from Brizo, and lastly, but not least in any way, I've got Mr. Andrew Mears, who is going to talk to us about a particular innovation related to battery storage. So each of these innovations, in fact, are quite very, very interesting in their own capacity. And I can promise you that the range of products and services that we will get to hear about is really a diverse lot. And the format of the session is likely to be, what we have planned is short presentations from each of these members. And then we will have time for questions. So if you have questions to any particular presenter, please send them into the chat box. And at the end of this short presentations, we will, as a total, once the 6 presentations are done, we will actually be taking up the questions. We'll put them to the various presenters, and then we will take the discussion forward. A request to the presenters that, when you are speaking, if you could get your video and audio in a switched on mode, of course. But once it's done, if you could just put yourself back into audio and video mute, so that you can let the next presenter come in with the presentation, and we can minimize the echoes and the disturbances on the way. So keeping that in view, I would request Mr. Martin Abdul to talk to us about his innovation, and I'll leave him to speak much more about it. So over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Matushi. So let me just share the screen. So I'm not able to share the screen. Can someone help me?
I think you should have a share screen button,
At the
green
bottom.
button. Yeah, great.
Yeah, that looks great.
Yeah. So hi, everyone. I'm Mateen, co-founder at Grassroots Energy. So we provide clean fuel and healthy food inputs in a distributed model. We are basically the 4 challenges we're trying to overcome. Agriculture contributes to about 21% of the global emissions and needs about innovative mitigating solutions. We need robust business model and technology for clean fuels to be scaled up. And we need local jobs and communities. And we need sustainable agri-inputs to retain the topsoil and nutrients. As we know, energy is the bedrock of economic development. If energy is generated clean, sustainable, local and cheaper, it can provide significant difference to the local economies. In most parts of India, there are widely available organic waste which can be productively used. As the waste is spread out, the technology needs to be distributed in a distributed format to provide the local needs. Our solution is bio-CNG. It's an ultra clean, ultra low carbon natural gas. Grassroots Energy has developed multiple technologies and innovations across the value chain. Our approach has three solutions. One, clean fuel. Second is waste management. And third is organic fertilizers. Bio-CNG helps in accelerating an adoption of clean fuels. Bio-CNG can reduce about 90% of the carbon footprint over fossil fuels. Organic waste limits the methane emissions. Organic fertilizers sequesters the carbon to protect against extreme events. In addition, it enhances the nutrients in the soil to retain the input costs and increase in yields. Our approach touches upon 11 of the UN SDG goals. The existing biogas upgradation systems are available in larger formats or larger sizes to the factor of about 8 to 10 times. What we're doing is presenting a distributed format, thus increasing the wider deployment of the clean fuels. Our rotating disk scrubbing system operates at atmospheric pressure and energy efficiency, which is much higher, resulting in superior performance. So this results in, which is a modular system, which is 3x energy efficient over alternatives and 2x lesser in terms of operating costs. In most places, gas grids are not available. The only option left is to bottle the gas at high pressure, resulting in high costs and energy during the compression process. Our patent pending adsorption-based cylinders can result in storage pressures at the same mass. So the advantages are 3x in reduction in pressures and less capex and opex and less regulation, which means a wider deployment at the remote locations. So we're looking at three cases of end users. One is cooking, thereby increasing, it can be replacement for LPG or it can be an additional clean fuel, which can be used in commercial cooking. It could be even in domestic cooking. Remote power, it can be used as a fuel for generating electricity, especially in remote locations. And third could be mobility, and this could be not only the traditional applications, it could be even for agricultural applications as well. Could be for productive loads. So yeah, so that's it from our end. So happy to take any further questions.
Thank you, Mateen. This is very interesting. Frankly, I mean, when I was going through your website, I mean, what really struck me is just how strong the core benefits are to the model that you have actually put together. So I just had one single question that I would be would really appreciate if you could help me with. I mean, what has been the type of response that you have been receiving from the farmers, especially smallholder farmers, or village households for the product that you have put in place?
So we have the existing framework. We have on the bio-CNG side, it's on the testing phase, but on the fertilizers and the waste management, it's already in practice in multiple places in the state of Bihar. And we have a unique value proposition for the waste collection, thereby giving them services, thereby which increases the incomes on a regular basis. Thereby, it is not a price mechanism, but rather an engagement with the community, which is a deeper engagement. And second is on the organic fertilizers. We have been working with large organizations and also in the farmer cooperatives to ensure that these are alternative to the chemical fertilizers. And we have seen increase in yields and the farmers able to see improvement in the soil quality and improvement in the farm yields. And the results have been fantastic. And there have been significant amount of farmers who have cut down about 60 to even 80% of the dependency on chemical fertilizers. And now we are taking this solution to a much larger scale.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'd love to know more about the product, but for later. Thank you. So can I request you to just mute your audio and video and request Mr. Srivastav, Kushagra Srivastav, to tell us a little more about his product. Mr. Srivastav, if you could just get your audio and video both switched on.
Am I audible now?
Yes, we can see you. Thank you so much. Carry on.
Is my screen visible?
Yes,
The
it is.
presentation? Yes, great. Thank you. Sorry, there was some mix-up. I'm the founder and CEO at Chakra Innovation, and we are trying to solve the problem of air pollution for India. So basically, of course, air pollution, we talk about it, the major health scares are due to the particulate matter, PM 2.5 and PM 10, as they're popularly known. Now, PM 2.5 is much more hazardous because of the smaller size. It enters the nose, the lungs cannot filter it, and it directly goes into the bloodstream of humans. And one, it has been linked to various problems, not just respiratory, but also cardiovascular, preterm births, and various other health ailments. Now, coming to the various sources of this particulate matter 2.5 within India. So again, these are various studies done by the Ministry of Environment, Central Pollution Control Board, various IITs as well, that estimate that stationary diesel generators, which are used for power backup across the country, contribute significantly to the particulate matter concentration in the ambient air. So just to give you some numbers, approximately 16% of particulate matter, PM 2.5 pollution in Delhi NCR comes from stationary DG sets. 25% in Bangalore, which is the second highest contributor after commercial vehicles, around 9% in Chennai, and similar figures for other metropolitan cities as well. The other thing that makes emissions from diesel generators very hazardous is that it's a very local source of emissions. So although the emissions from a commercial vehicle are spread across the highway, and it will get diluted by the time it reaches a residential complex or a school, but for a diesel generator, the exhaust is located right in the heart of a densely populated residential society, school, college, hospital, etc., which makes the emissions even more deadly. So there are studies which suggest that when a diesel generator is running, the particulate matter concentration in the nearby area is almost 50% higher than the PM concentration in the ambient air at that point in time. So we started Chakra Innovation around 3 years back to solve this problem. And we are all engineers who started this company. So we wanted to use technology to help address this problem. So it took us around 2 years of research and development to develop a novel retrofit emission control equipment. It's a patented technology, which essentially fits on a diesel generator's exhaust. So when the exhaust comes out of the diesel generator, it passes through our device. Our device is a mixture of various catalysts, various mechanisms that we have designed using computational fluid dynamics. And the end result or the output is that we are able to reduce particulate matter emissions by around 84%. And this has again been tested by government labs. Carbon monoxide emissions we are able to reduce by 94%, and hydrocarbon emissions we are able to reduce by 95%. So that's the difference in the concentration of various pollutants before and after our equipment. And the product has a long life of 10 to 12 years. There is very minimal energy that is used to operate it. So we use less than 1% of the net power output of the diesel generators. The back pressure is within permissible limits. So basically the equipment is invisible to the engine, so it does not increase the fuel consumption in any way. There are no harmful byproducts, etc. And the emissions are reduced significantly. So that's the technology that we have built and we've been commercializing. We currently have over 90 of these devices deployed on diesel generators from 15 kVA, which is like a small DG set used in a household or a small shop, all the way up to 2000 kVA, which are larger engines used in malls, large manufacturing units, etc. And the impact that we've been able to create has been tremendous. So, in all of these 80, 90 cases, in the last 1.5 years since when the technology has been deployed, it has been consistently reducing that amount of emissions. The government of India has also accepted our recommendations to make the norms more stringent. So a few state governments have actually made retrofitting of diesel generators mandatory in their respective states. These are the current users of our technology. So some of the Tata Group companies, large oil and gas companies, British High Commission, FMCG sector has been adopting the technology. And in terms of, just to tell you the recognitions and awards that we have, so the technology has been awarded nationally and internationally. We were awarded as the UN Champions of Earth by in 2018. WWF Climate of Change, Forbes 30 Under 30, and various other national and international recognitions. So that is what we are trying to do, is to solve the problem of air pollution for India. That is briefly about us. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much. I mean, especially, I mean, obviously over the last, not taking into account the last 90 days, I think the issue of
Yeah.
air pollution is actually been such a big issue. It has occupied so much of mind space and news space across the whole country. I think this is likely to be of huge potential. But my question was, just wanted to, if you could tell me, I mean, how has this product been? I mean, I'm assuming that this is probably a unique offering that is available in the market today. And have you been able to take it to the pollution control boards and of the states and the center? And what has their response been?
Sure. So that's a very fair question to ask. So basically, we have been interacting with the Ministry of Environment. This is the union government and the Central Pollution Control Board. And since last couple of years, we've been advocating that diesel generators are a prominent source of pollution. And we already have almost 90 gigawatt of installed capacity of diesel generators. So in India, it is estimated that the total power production capacity that we have as a country, including nuclear, thermal, solar, everything, is anywhere between 500 to 600 gigawatts. 90 gigawatts is diesel generators growing at almost 5 to 7% year on year. So we essentially educated the various policymakers that, one, it's a huge problem. It's a problem that is here to stay and needs to be addressed immediately. And of course, a few countries have already adopted retrofit policies. A few European countries, Australia, certain states in the United States. And after almost a 2-year-long process, the government of India did accept our recommendation. And under the National Clean Air Action Program that was released by the Ministry of Environment, they did recognize DG sets as a huge source of problem and made a recommendation to various state governments, state pollution control boards, to make retrofitment policies for their respective states. After that, 3 states in India have already implemented the policy. Others are in the pipeline. Hopefully, once the lockdown opens up, we'll see more action on that front.
Good luck with that. Thank you so much, Kushagra. Thanks. We will move on to the next the presenter. I would like to retain time for questions. Over to you, Mr. Bhardwaj. Mr. Bhardwaj heads the MACLAC. Yes, please carry on. Yes, good to see. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Electricity is the necessity to make our lives convenient and comfortable. The post-COVID-19 goal of the India to be self-sufficient is possible only when India can be self-reliant in renewable energy generation. Hi, I'm Balram Bhardwaj. Along with Mr. Narayan Bhardwaj, we have been working in the field of environment and mechanical engineering since last 15 years. Being born and brought up in a remote village of India, every day's challenge to make life easy ignited a zeal to find quickly jugaad. That is to experiment with our limited resources in an innovative ways with a flexible approach. Those childhood experiences have grown into a passion and now a full-time profession at MACLAC, where we bring our ideas into life. This is one of the ideas. So MACLAC was established in 2014 in New Delhi. We identified the hydrokinetic potential, which is going west so far in the form of canal and rivers water flow, which is going west. The global hydrokinetic potential is more than 3,000 gigawatts, which we have identified, and Indian global potential is more than 175 gigawatt, which is going westward. That's the reason we have identified one of the most easiest way to harness this potential. Next. So the present renewable energy sources like solar, wind, and energies and similar technologies are very unreliable, owing their seasonal and diurnal variations and their limited scope of these technologies. Existing hydropower projects are also very vulnerable to natural disasters and can cause irreversible impact to the local biodiversity, flora, fauna, and dependent livelihood are worst hit. So we need to some better ideas to balance these yet delivering best. So you can see here in the slide that you can find out the conventional renewable energy sources like solar, biopower, wind, and small hydro. They have very limited scope in our complete hydro power generation basket. Next. So to identifying this problem, we come up with a solution to generate hydropower with a very reliable, easy to implement hydrokinetic turbine. It is a completely indigenous turbine which we called SHK, surface hydrokinetic turbine. It is a fundamental difference of this turbine than conventional one because it doesn't require any kind of civil structure. So the solution for environmental issues is no civil structure required, so no divergence into the river, so no mega civil structure is required. Approval issues is very less because here we can install directly to the any kind of canal and river. Gestation time of this turbine installation is very limited. Like once you install the turbine, you start generating the power. The LCOE cost of this turbine is very, very low, like 0.7 lakh per kilowatt is the installation cost, and less than 1 rupees we can approach to get the power generation cost. And for this technology, we have got more than 8 national awards, and including World Wildlife Fund Climate Solver Award and the European Union's Climate Solver Technology Award. Recently, NASA from US identified this turbine as an X-Factor innovation of the world and invited us to US. So far, we have installed more than 60 field trials certified by IIT Roorkee and many other eminent organizations. We are revenue positive, raised more than $1 million US, currently installing our first 100 kilowatt plant and 5 megawatt plant in Punjab. And we have more than 100 megawatt worth of orders under our pipeline. Next. So why this technology is worth to have installed in Indian rural areas? Because the less than $1,500 per kilowatt hour capex and the lowest opex and 2 cents per kilowatt hour unit generation cost, our turbine is the most affordable, modular, scalable, replicable, relocatable, debris free, simplest yet robust energy generation systems, which is easy to fabricate, transport, assemble, and install with a negligible structure, capable to harness energy from running rivers, canals, rivulets, tidal streams, having at least 0.5 meter per second. You can say we're very limited, like 0.5 meter per second, we can start generating power. So as a pressure aerator, this turbine not only generates power from the rivers, it can also treat the water by adding more oxygen into the water itself. So it enhances the dissolved oxygen level and reduce the BOD and COD levels. So next. So why the demand is right now? As I can tell you already that the share of renewable energy in Indian energy sector is increasing and demand is keep on increasing. Right now, the government of India require a base load power solution for renewable energy. And that is why government of India has given us various incentives like government schemes are there, renewable purchase agreement obligations are there, low cost, long-term bank loans are there, and time-bound renewable energy targets are already there. So post COVID-19 utilization of our technology is very much higher because it can provide a distributed generation solution for hydro sector growth. It can enhance the rural economic development by providing an irrigation and post-harvest management solution. And it can reduce the cost of MSME productions by giving them a low-cost energy solution and can also generate the more environment-friendly outcomes. Next. So the business model is we are targeting right now for off-grid and grid-connected power plants. For off-grid, we are targeting through the buyers like local communities, MSMEs, institutions, like government institutions are helping us to get this technology installed nearby the rivers and canal where the farmers are actually farming. And for the grid-connected systems, we are in touch with CSIR and also NHPC, Tata Power, and other major giants. Next. So here the MECLEC, we are dedicated to implement this technology on the ground, and we are doing very well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Balram. This is really very helpful. Just one question
Sure.
from my end. Basically, I just wanted to know that, one of the issues that we hear about hydropower is the fact that, it's in many cases, it's not a perennial source. So
Yeah.
have you focused only on perennial sources, and do you think climate change and reduced water in the waterways themselves have the chance to affect the model that you have put in place?
Yeah, so that is the reason we are first targeting to those areas where at least 6 months of running water is available. And second, we have developing another module which can be installed in tidal streams. In
Okay.
tides, there are perennial. So we are
Yeah.
also trying to implement this in tidal areas where the tidal rivers and currents are there. So this is
Okay.
another model which is coming up in next year itself.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is very helpful. So we'll move on to the next presenter. I've got Mr. Rakesh, who is leading on Meladeth Auto component parts, and I would request him to come on board. Mr. Bhardwaj, if I can request you to just switch off your video for the moment, but stay connected. We will all come back together at the end of the 6 presentations. Thank you.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Good evening, Madhushi.
Good evening. Yeah.
Yeah. Is my screen seen?
Yes, it's visible now.
Okay. So good evening to all. So I'm Rakesh. I'm founder of an automotive manufacturing startup based out of Bangalore. What we have done is we are working on IC engine technologies and e-mobility solutions. Today, we would like to share our easy hybrid. This is a retrofittable electric hybrid conversion kit for petrol scooters. The petrol scooters, old scooters, which are polluting, can be made into a greener solutions without any modifications. So briefly, this is our team. We are working on together on these solutions. These are our product portfolios. We have solutions for IC engines, and we are working towards electric mobility solutions. And when we had started off way back in 2016, when we were an IC engine technology company, we used to run for raising capital. We used to meet people, and most of the investors used to give us some feedback that why should we invest on IC engine technology where the future is going to be electric. And the way what we thought is, as a startup, we also wanted to come into an electric mobility, but we didn't want it to be any other startup working on a scooter, bikes, or cars, because we knew that electric mobility is not new to India. We've been seeing electric solutions almost a decade old, like Ampere's, Hero Electric, TVS, and have been tried this technology almost a decade old. But there are challenges in market which is preventing people in adapting electric mobility. So we wanted to see that we address those challenges which is not met by electric mobility today. And that's why we thought about this solution called as easy hybrid. So just to give the glimpse of what the solutions offers, like for example, we all know like we need sustainable, innovative solutions which are greener. So today the problem is with all these existing mobility solutions are we have the prices are going higher, we have environment which is getting depleted, the resources are getting depleted, and further like the vehicle densities are getting increased. And in order to tackle those challenges, if you look at an alternative, like if you want to buy an electric mobility, the challenge to an buyer is the cost of adoption is higher, and he has to live the challenges like you have a very limited charging infrastructures, reliability, and again, when we talk about electric mobility, we are all limiting the solution access to only to urban population. We don't have any solutions today to offer to rural. So these were the challenges we wanted to address. So what we have come out thought is, when we wanted to address these challenges, we realized that short term, if you want to look at as a long term, obviously the alternative fuels are the best solutions to take in. But to address the solutions immediately, we needed something on electric hybridization. So these were the thoughts behind coming out of our solutions. So what we have done today is we have a retrofittable electric hybrid conversion kit, which is patent granted. So what idea is, there are almost 8 crore petrol scooters in India which are running on road. These are polluting scooters, which can be converted to a scooter which can be driven both on electric and petrol together. So our kit, which consists of components, when we add to a scooter, the scooter becomes a dual fuel scooter. Means a user can run the scooter in electric mode for up to 40 kilometers using 1 kilowatt replaceable battery. Then when the battery gets drained, unlike any other electric mobility user, he doesn't have to get a range anxiety or fear, because you have to just switch the mode of the scooter to a petrol and continuous commuting. So here we will address the need, address the challenges like range anxiety, which is the biggest concern in buyer today. and again reliability. So today when we talk about an electric mobility, we are not sure about the electric power availability in our homes for next 2 hours also. So we can't expect somebody to completely rely his mobility solutions on electric. So this is a solutions. That's how like we try to address the challenge in the market. So when you look at a customer value propositions, the kit which is you have developed is retrofittable, which means does not require any modification welding process on the scooter. It can be converted. A scooter can be converted within 40 minutes of a time without any welding, which means the whole scooter can be returned back in the same condition. And the whole cost of ownership would be almost 40% because we are not selling a whole scooter and all the, because today when you talk about ownership cost, you talk about road tax, insurance, everything. But when you're talking about a kit, the cost of ownership would be much more cheaper. And we're going to get almost 50-40 kilometers range in a scooter. And social impact of this solution is, as we all talk about like sustainability, it's not the new vehicles which are polluting the environment. It's about the old scooters and vehicles. So this solution, when immediately when it's implemented, is going to impact, bring an impact in the that area where the pollutions are higher. And again, when we talk about any electric mobility solutions, it ends up adding more vehicles on the street. In our solution, we are not going to add a scooter on the vehicles, thereby like we don't we'll be able to use our existing resources more efficiently. And obviously that impact is we'll have more vehicle waste management possibility. And the impact of this idea are multi-front. In terms of social, in terms of like environment, we will be able to bring down almost 15% reduction of GHG emissions, which will enable the government of India to meet the targets. And also another one is we have estimated that if an end user is commuting 50 kilometers a day with a petrol of 100 rupees, with our kit, he will be sustaining that same 100 rupees petrol for 4 days, which means he will be not going to petrol bunk for next 3 days, because he has 40 kilometers on electric and remaining only 10 kilometers he will commute on a petrol. So thereby what will happen is daily consumption petrol will also come down. So you will be able to have much more better sustainable solutions. And obviously like and all the components of this component has been designed and developed in India. So all the vendors are in India. So we will be able to bring in a lot of resources and technologies upfront. And this was how we started. We had an initial product where we wanted to test it. Okay, the idea is the kit is fitted on the front wheel. So this is one of our technology where the front wheel is fitted with a powertrain. And and this is our testing scenarios where we wanted to see how it works with a 2-passenger with a front wheel power. So we made sure that the kit works perfectly in the user application. And in terms of attributes, we are I think we should say that this is the world's first technology wherein we have a hybrid which is retrofittable. We have a scalable. We are talking about a kit which can be easily implemented. And another way of looking at it, this will be an Indian innovation for a global application, because the two-wheeler market is not just limited to India. All the developing countries are mostly a two-wheeler market, and this can bring in an immediate impact there. And so this is something which on a market size on domestic, as I earlier said, there are almost 8 crore petrol scooters as per the records, and almost like 4 crores are only Honda Activa themselves have sold almost 4 crore petrol scooters. And today we've been receiving a lot of inquiries from international market as well, like Southeast Asian market, Pakistan, Indonesia, and also from Europe we have received inquiries. So this is our business model where we would be directly implementing to our customers. We're also getting inquiries for a B2B, where a lot of fleet owners who are using a petrol scooter fleets to be converted to electric. This is our roadmap, and the way forward is we are looking forward to raise more funds. We were the best startups in Untitled Innovation Mission's New India Challenge, and we would be coming down to market by end of this year with all the formal regulation process followed. So these are mentors who are behind us, who have been supporting us. Some of the recognitions we have. Our innovations have garnered. So like this year we have won the Untitled Innovations New India Challenge on mobility and a total this Tata Trust Social Alpha Challenge. So that's briefly about our innovations to sustainability. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Rakesh. I think there is a lot of potential, as you say. I mean, and the business case that you make is really very promising. And I hope, looking forward there is uptake of this product as much as possible as we move forward as such. We are running a little late for the session as such, so I'm going to move to the next presenter. So I have got with me Ms. Abhilasha Parwar, who is actually heading Brizo and Blue Sky Analytics, and I will request her to put her presentation through. Thank you.
Hi, just a second. Can you guys see me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thanks. And let me share my screen. Okay. And you can see the screen as well. Hello?
We can see it. Yeah, we can see it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, guys. So my name is Abhilasha, and I'm founder and CEO of Blue Sky Analytics. Let me just go back to the beginning. Okay, so we are, I'll come to the kind of firm. The major focus that we have is on overall climate change and climate risk. We actually started our journey with air pollution, but very soon realized that most of these issues were extremely interdisciplinary topic, and the technology play that we were doing allowed us to actually expand beyond air into other domains and became like a climate change focused satellite data analytics company. So thanks so much for all the presenters before me. And I mean, some of the innovations are amazing, but all of the innovations were in the hardware space. And we might be actually some data partners for you to expand your hardwares into all parts of the country, essentially. And that was our goal, to become like Bloomberg for environmental data and help whoever is taking an environmental product out or a climate decision or a climate action to make the best kind of decision in the fastest, quickest manner. Because what we realized with just playing around with air pollution data for 6 months was that we were spending our time just collating so much information to get like basic overview about things. And this time that was going in data analytics was going away from decision making, was going away from actual actions on the ground. And hence we sort of build a global environmental data stack, which is in air, water, soil, urban informatics, flood and drought risk, extreme heat, and farm and forest fires. And how we came onto this was that we actually started playing with this one particular satellite and its data about 8 months after it was launched. And 3 months later, you're like, this is what we're going to do for like next 5 to 7 years, because this data is so powerful and there's so much of it, but it's not really analyzed and taken to the customers in the best manner, and it's not really harvested. So as you can see, there is increased like satellite data, and there is increased climate uncertainty in the world, and in the intersection we sort of emerged. So this is kind of what our daily work looks like. The first one is one of our product that's already out, which is on air quality monitoring. And we have a pan-India air quality data API. So you hit the API, you give us the latitude, longitude, the time of the day, and we'll give you what was the air quality in that place and for much longer historical time series. And we recently crossed more than like 1.5 million hits on that API. So there's a lot of people who want to extract this information and use it for different purposes. The second one is farm and forest fires. This actually started because we're based in Gurgaon, and we see so much like pollution in the month of October and November from the crop fires that burn like right next door. And as I think the first startup was saying that, you know, you can do so much with like biomass and biomass-based electricity and other products, but that was not happening. And we went into more details into like why were people not enabling this like crop waste-based economy and converting this crop waste into tangible goods rather than, you know, just burning it up. And again, time, decision making, collecting data, pricing, all of those informations were not taking much more time than it would with our product. So we started working on calculating emissions, when are the fires happening, when is people harvesting, all those kinds of stuff. And you will be surprised to know we got so much attraction for this product from across the globe. We got a lot of inbounds from Australia during the Australian fires. We got a lot of inbounds during the Amazonian fires and even during the Siberian fires, because global fire management has become a very forthcoming agenda, sadly because of the climate change and increasing temperature. The third product is my favorite. It's industrial emissions. So we started monitoring all the power plants across the country from satellites. So they have no clue that we exist, but we know what they are emitting on any day. And so as of now, we get data at a 3-day frequency, but we can like tell you which power plant emitted on an annual basis or a monthly basis, how much pollution across the last year. And we want to do it for many industrial clusters. So there is no more hiding. There is no more lying. There is no more like telling that my data was 150 and anything. Right now, obviously, there is a big slump in the market because of the economic downturn. But when the economy revives again, we want to be there to make sure that a green economy revives and not a polluting economy, and put that thing to work. We then moved into water monitoring from air last year when Chennai ran out of water, and we sort of had some conversations with certain like government officers on just like planning, because a lot of people should have known that this is going to be the case in future, but Chennai and Tamil Nadu was not exactly very prepared for it. And monitoring the surface water bodies, both quantity and quality, actually gives us really extensive data set and understanding into even like agriculture risk, flood risk, and so forth. And then we also started to sort of monitor like pollutants that were coming into different bodies. And this is like so much more powerful because now you can have an understanding of Yamuna or Ganga as a river and know where your pollution sources are and actually go to them, as opposed to like we say, satellites, eyes in the sky are better than boots on the ground because it gives you really the scale and the, that you need to take the action. So we are a completely tech team. When the remote working started, we were completely comfortable, and it actually enhanced our productivity. And we decided we will never come back to office again. So we have about 12 people in the team who work in their houses across the world now, and they take global satellite data along with ancillary data and a lot of ground measurement data, which is what we call our pipeline, as you can see on the left-hand side. This goes into processing, and so this is what we are kind of building. We make a parallel of this from oil refinery, and we say like Dhirubhai Ambani built the biggest oil refinery in the country. We're going to build biggest data refinery and provide environmental data to everybody. And in the end, you get APIs, and often we even put a dashboard or a web platform or a mobile app onto our API and provide it to final customers. We are an AI company, and the major value proposition comes from the fact that satellite data is about 200 TBs, which is way too much than any government agency, any private sector, any public policy think tank, anybody to analyze. This needs specialized skills. So even though Dalberg or MacArthur Foundation or Chakra Innovation or Indian government might have a lot of use cases and a lot of information that might come from this, but none of you guys simply have that capacity, and that's what we wanted to build. And so our value comes from taking 200 terabytes of crude oil, crude data, into 200 megabytes of refined data streams and give it to our customers. This is some of our examples. Like Zuri is a product which mixes AI and satellite to monitor fires and has gotten pretty good this thing. Brizo, I'll give some features. It's available at 1 by 1 kilometer square resolution, which is pretty massive. And we also have about 15 years of historical data. So you can really compare what was happening in 2007 versus 2017 versus 2020. We just did some bunch of articles on pre and post COVID, and they got really good reception because you see such a clear downfall. This is how some of our platforms look like. We're getting into the fire work where we will have potentially 18 years of historical data, and it'll be completely automated. So there's any fire, if like a Uttarakhand government or Punjab government is trying to monitor it out, it makes life much easier. I have a storm in the background, sorry. Those are some of the features that we are putting out. We have won a lot of AI innovation prize. We won just yesterday, actually, we won a $300,000 AI for Humanity prize from Patrick J. McGowan Foundation and Schmidt Futures. We are raising our seed round, and we are sort of reaching out to our customers. We've got some really high profile customers range in the US, in New York, in Australia, and in India. And if you know, okay, I will do my sales pitch. If you know any tech people out there, we're hiring tech lead, full stack developer, data scientists. And if your friends are into tech, or just tell them to learn how to code over the next 2-3 months and then apply for us, because we want all the smartest engineers and data scientists in the country to work on climate action with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Abhilasha. This is, as usual, I've heard you before, and as exciting as the last pitch that you had put through, the fact that we are able to use artificial intelligence to take all this information, put it into data bytes that are useful to various sets of institutions, I think is hugely promising. And I think going forward, COVID or no COVID, I think the potential for this type of product is huge. Since we are running a little short of time, Abhilasha, we'll move on to the next presentation, the last one from Dr. Andrew Mears. And again, I think like the other presentations, I think another very, very interesting model coming up. So please stay put. Thanks.
Thanks.
Hello, how are you? Let me just share my screen here. Okay, you should be seeing my screen. Is that okay?
Yes, yes, we can. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I've got my evening background here because it's late in the evening. I'm actually speaking to you from just north of Sydney. So I would like to have been there to have done this remotely from India, but remotely from Newcastle is almost the same. So a little bit about Switched In. We're looking to solve a key problem that's facing the energy transition, and India is at the forefront of dealing with this problem. What we're seeing is the transition of a centralized managed system to a distributed energy service. And in particular, it's being driven by the uptake of renewable energy. Many forms of renewable energy have the wonderful advantage that you can use the energy near the location where it's generated. So what this means is that we've had a burgeoning of a whole range of new energy service models. But there's a problem because these systems, whilst they might be able to generate energy on their own, their utility and their efficiency is greatly enhanced when they work in concert with the modern grid. But by and large, these systems are uncontrolled, and this can lead to problems. India has done very well, for example, in terms of promoting the uptake of solar energy. But with a weak distribution network, the advantages that could come from this intensive investment and activity are just not going to be realized. So we look to solve that problem, but I can't solve my problem with my slide here. So for some reason, I can't seem to change my slide. Okay. So we seek to solve that problem. So Switched In was founded in 2014, and we've been very active in the Australian market. We work with almost all the major utilities. In Australia, we have a disaggregated market. So our focus has been around supporting the distribution networks and improving their ability to handle distributed energy resources. In particular, rooftop solar and battery storage. And I'm really here talking about the smaller systems, so less than 30 megawatts, that wouldn't otherwise be considered the systems that are controlled by the utility SCADA solutions. This is really the forefront of the scaling opportunity that will come from renewable energy. Smaller, behind the meter, and smaller utility and commercial and industrial type assets. So we have an energy management solution and a cloud platform that enables us to firstly connect and integrate different distributed energy resource assets. So solar inverters, battery systems, power meters, and certain controlled loads such as air conditioning and heat pumps. This interconnection enables us to coordinate and control these assets in order to improve the operation of microgrids, to build virtual power plants to enable energy market participation, and also just to improve the way these assets work in the local network. We work with distribution network operators, with energy service companies and electricity retailers, with system integrators and microgrid developers, and more recently with manufacturers as we start to embed our software into third-party products, such as smart meters and battery storage systems. We work with all the tier 1 customers in Australia, and in 2018, we started deploying solutions into the European market. Last year, in 2019, we started early market development activities in India, and we recognize a key opportunity, and we're keen to identify partners. So what's the real problem? So having lots of rooftop solar and having batteries deployed and having generators installed into the local distribution network can deliver a lot of benefits. But many of these won't be realized. In fact, many of these will actually create problems for the network operator if the network operator doesn't have visibility on the way these things are operating. And in particular, that they don't have the ability to manage and coordinate their operation. So unmanaged distributed energy resources can lead to power quality and reliability issues. In Australia and in India, we're seeing regions where there is either large solar PV presence or large solar PV plants, or weak grids, such as on the edge of the network. We're seeing the rise of voltage issues and concomitant disruptions to service. We're also seeing investments in alternate energy service models, such as microgrids through escrows, that are just not realizing the full potential of these investments. So one of the challenges, Bud, is that these types of DER assets, it's a very fragmented market, and there's no uniform standards for connecting these smaller assets. Technical standards would go a long way to help, but this is a very innovative and fragmented market. What Switched In has been able to do is to build a big library of integrations. If you like, we are the Zapier of distributed energy resources. We enable the interconnection of a whole range of vendor products and different asset types into the control systems of the distribution networks and into the operating, and in order to provide an operating platform for energy service companies. So Switched In brings harmony to the shouting match that is today's distributed energy system. We install a local controller energy management solution on a site which manages the integration and exchange of data and enablement of control. Embedded in these edge devices is the machine learning and predictive optimization tools that enable us to optimize based on forecasted demand and forecasted generation on each site. We then enable through our cloud platform and through through our communication platform agnostic data pathways. We enable coordination between sites to improve the operation of microgrids, and across larger areas to build virtual power plants for energy market participation. So, so that's it. We are very keen to identify partners in the Indian market, in particular system integrators and project developers. We see a big opportunity in the commercial rooftop solar space, where existing developers are looking to seek new value by co-opting the value that comes from on-site battery storage and selling network services. We're also interested in partners in the ESCO space that are looking to improve efficiency and coordination between community microgrids and low voltage network operators.
Thank you so much. This is very helpful to understand. And as I started out by saying, I think just the wide range of spotlights that we have had the opportunity to actually experience today is quite mind-blowing. And the options that are available for a greener future ahead with frugal solutions, with integrated solutions that were presented today, I think makes a huge difference. I know many of you have actually put up questions in the Q&A section. Thank you, Andrew. I'll probably just try to close this down a little bit now because of time constraints. And I just to sort of speak to the participants in overall that we have received a fair number of questions for the presentations that were made. Due to paucity of time, I don't think we have time enough time to respond to each of them as such. My request would be that you can actually pursue these questions by contacting the presenters themselves. They are listed on the Charcha website, and in case you would like to reach out to them, I would suggest that please reach out to them directly. Before I sign off and I thank the presenters, I would request each of the 6 presenters to actually get their videos switched on so that everybody is visible at the same time, so that participants get a chance to see all the presenters once more. Can I request everybody to come online? Abhilasha,
I can't. Somebody has to give me the permission.
Oh,
same here.
Nargesh, yeah, we can see you now. Yes, wonderful. Can we have the video option for Mr. Bhardwaj?
Yeah, I'm about to do, but host has disabled it, so I think I need permission from host.
Rohit, Nargesh, can one of you help out? Martin, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I think mine also switched off. I'm not able to turn it on.
So Chacha says, please try now.
No, it doesn't turn on.
Doesn't turn on. Okay.
So I'm still disabled by the host.
Must be because of a technical glitch. But I really wanted to thank you for making time for this presentation. I found the 6 presentations so fascinating. They touch upon different parts of this clean energy debate that we currently experience across the board, and which has taken on a new meaning altogether with the COVID situation and the economic crisis that has come through. One thing that has really come across very clearly is the fact that we would need solutions locally, local solutions which are frugal in their approach and which meet specific demands. And each of the presentations that I think that were made today meet that indicator very strongly as such. So I would really request participants to get in touch with the presenters if you would like to know more. I certainly have some questions myself and I will come back to it. And so thank you very much. Hope to connect sometime again in the near future. Thank you. Over to you, Nudge team, the Dalbert team. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us for this session. We're now going to revert to our earlier panel format. Please stay tuned for our next session on decentralized energy. We have panelists from the Solar Alliance, the International Solar Alliance, the European Investment Bank, and Rockefeller Foundation. See you all there.
Thank you.
Arnaba, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. Okay, so we should be starting the new session in 1 minute.
Okay.
I'll just introduce you and the panelists, and then we can.
Yeah.
Begin.
And I'm assuming everyone is already online. Yeah, I can see Jagjit, I can see Radhika.
Hi, Arnab. This is Ashwin.
Hi, Ashwin.
Hi, it's Radhika. Thought I might as well just check and make sure you all can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Okay, I'm going to start the next session now. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Decentralized Energy Panel. We have very interesting panelists representing leading organizations in the space. There's Radhika Thakkar, Vice President, Greenlight Planet, Jagjit Sareen, Director of the International Solar Alliance, Ashwin Dayal, Senior Vice President of Power, Rockefeller Foundation, and Henrik Engelmann-Pilger. I really hope I haven't mangled your name, from the European Investment Bank. The moderator for this session is Arunabha Ghosh, the founder and CEO of the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water. Arunabha, over to you.
Thank you, Nirgesh, and good evening, everyone. I hope you all have been enjoying the engaging sessions in this two-day virtual conference. Lockdown as we are, it's hard to know, when is it morning, afternoon, evening. I just feel I'm always in front of a screen, but I also look forward to engaging conversations that actually would have taken a much longer time to actually get people together and put things together. So there is an upside to be able to do these things quickly and get a range of voices together. In this section, we are going to be discussing distributed energy. And, for those of you who don't know me, I run the Council on Energy, Environment, and Water. And one of the things that is very dear to our hearts is the future of the energy system, particularly the electricity system. And since 2012, when we first started looking very closely at distributed energy, we saw that there's been a huge change in the way the sector was perceived then versus what the opportunities are now. For instance, if I just reflect on the past, distributed energy was considered to be only something that was used to fill a gap that the centralized energy system could not. That it was meant to be always small scale, both in terms of the deal sizes, but also the number of systems installed and so forth, compared to the larger energy system. And it was considered to be something that only targeted the bottom of the pyramid, the energy poor, those excluded from the energy system. What has changed in the last decade? Of course, a lot of those earlier propositions still hold true. There are still a lot of poor people who remain outside of the energy net, even though a wire might have been strung across to their homes, or that they might have got access to an LPG cylinder for clean cooking. Nevertheless, they still tend to get served by a range of distributed energy systems. But more than that, we see a huge uptick in what could be called community energy, energy that is used for primary schools in rural areas, primary health centers. Just one state in India, Chhattisgarh, installed more than 1,000 primary health centers with distributed solar. I, in fact, won an award on the basis of that program, which also had an impact on the footfalls in these primary health centers, the improvement in health metrics. Given that we are talking about improving and strengthening our health systems, what might be the role of distributed energy there? We also see now an increasing focus on distributed energy on the productive energy side. What kind of applications of distributed energy could be used in agriculture? India has already deployed more solar-based irrigation pumps than any other country in the world, and has a plan to deploy a total of 2.7 million solar-based irrigation pumps to try and replace or displace the diesel or fossil-based electricity pumps. But even outside of agriculture, there are opportunities. My colleagues have found that there is a $50 billion opportunity in using distributed energy with efficient motors for income-generating activities in rural areas. Equally, one more change that has happened is that we are thinking more and more about distributed energy in the urban setting. the role of rooftop photovoltaic systems is no longer just something that you see on an episodic basis, a neighbor here or a colony there, but something that distribution companies are thinking very seriously about. So what might the future of distributed energy then look like? Will we have these systems be more interactive with grids? Will we be opening up completely new sectors, district heating and cooling, using distributed energy? Does distributed energy have a role in the electric mobility transition? So I think just less than a decade, we have moved from something that was completely marginal to something that could become very much mainstream. And yet, the big question for me is what has held back our imaginations. So we have a stellar panel here as they were introduced. I'm going to just reintroduce them once again. We've got Ashwin Dayal, Senior Vice President for Power at the Rockefeller Foundation, Radhika Thakkar, Vice President of Greenlight Planet, Jagjit Sareen, Director of the International Solar Alliance, and Hendrik Engelman-Pilger, Senior Energy Specialist at the European Investment Bank. I'm going to get started with asking each of our panelists to offer their initial remarks on this, but also keep in mind my opening question: what is holding back our imaginations? Maybe I'll start with Radhika.
Sure, thank you so much. Really interesting opening there, by the way. Let me spend just a minute explaining Greenlight Planet, what we do. So we make a range of solar home lighting solutions for households that are historically, particularly in India, entirely off the grid, increasingly for households and businesses that are grid connected, but with unpredictable, unreliable access to energy. So typically rural households, low income households who don't necessarily know when they might have access to the grid and need some sort of alternative lighting source. Historically, that would have been kerosene lamps. When our products come in, it's plug and play solar home systems. Our products are across rural India, as well as sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of South and Southeast Asia as well. So we're really serving a very specific segment of the market. And it's interesting, I was just thinking back to 2012 as you were describing the journey in the last 8 years as well. And for us and for our consumers, the vast majority of our customers were completely off grid in 2012 in India. When we started selling our products 11 years ago in India, half of the country was completely off grid and dependent on kerosene. And so today that's not the case. The majority of our customers are actually now grid connected in India. Not true in the rest of the world, certainly not in Africa where I'm based. But that is one huge change that we've seen in the last decade. And as I look forward to the next decade, I think this will continue to be the profile. I think we've got grid connected customers that want more autonomy over how they access their energy and when they access their energy. At the moment, when you ask what's holding us back, at the moment, right now, this COVID pandemic has, I think, opened up our eyes to a lot of challenges, and there's a lot of very near-term challenges. Obviously with the restricted mobility, but also some challenges that we see in the next, I don't know how many quarters or year as we kind of recover from this. And so I think some of the big questions for us is how do we sustain this really important work that we're doing, particularly in our case to serve the lowest income segments of our economy. And maybe I'll just pause there and happy to elaborate more.
Thank you, Radhika. And I'm going to come back to exactly that issue of, how do you deal with depressed demand given the pandemic and economic crisis we are in. But hold your thoughts on that for a second. Let me turn to Ashwin. Ashwin, the Rockefeller Foundation has for many years been pushing many different innovations around building up the markets around distributed energy. So when you reflect back on what's happened and you think ahead of what is likely to come about, what do you think is holding back our imaginations? Your initial thoughts.
Thanks, Arunabha, and thanks to everyone, to the organizers for this. It's great to see everyone. I mean, to your direct question, what's holding back the imagination? I mean, I think there are a lot of people who are trying to reimagine the future of energy, what we mean by a grid, a smart grid, notions of building the grid from the outside in. But you're right in the sense that that has not got mainstreamed enough. I think it is changing. I genuinely believe that we're seeing momentum, and we'll talk later about how is the current crisis, either going to be a decelerator or accelerator of that momentum. But I think momentum is shifting, and if you look at what's happening in Africa today, the level of mainstream financing coming into the off-grid sector, whether it's mini grids or solar home systems or other scales and technologies, is dramatically different from 5 years ago. I mean, if you talk to friends at the IFC who maybe 5 or 6 years ago would be pretty skeptical of this as an investable proposition, are now really at the forefront of thinking about how off-grid and mini grids can be part of the future. But this is a 150-year-old sector. There's a pretty strong incumbent mindset. So when you talk about what's holding back imagination, this is not a sector that's seen a huge amount of disruption and innovation. We built large centralized power plants and sort of extended transmission and distribution lines, and then finally reach the customer. And when we get to you, we'll get to you, kind of thing has been the mindset. Ironically, when we go back to the earliest forms of electrification, it actually did start with distributed energy, albeit with other sources of fuel. I think another challenge on imagination is sort of binary thinking. Like, you either have the grid or you don't have the grid. And so there's always been this sort of thinking about what happens if the grid arrives. And actually, we need to reimagine that question. It's the wrong question. It's not a question of what happens when the grid arrives. It's a question of how do you actually strengthen and make your grid more resilient by having a combination of technologies? How do you combine distributed renewable energy with a functioning or quasi-functioning grid, stabilize the grid, ensure reliability, et cetera, et cetera. And then I think the other thing is that there are real bottlenecks. There are policy bottlenecks. There are certainly cost and business model bottlenecks, certainly in the mini grid space that we've been most active in. Costs have come down. They need to come down further. And so we don't see, if you really operate with cost reflective tariffs in the mini grid sector, you're still way off what highly subsidized grid power can provide. And that's often a political bottleneck that can be difficult to overcome. And I'll say one last thing, and I'm thinking about this a lot today in the context of COVID, is I think we have not done a good enough job at actually building the evidence and demonstrating the fundamental link and centrality of energy consumption to sort of issues of poverty and development, particularly in the context of the 21st century. And when we think about the economy structure today, we firmly believe that we can't end poverty if we don't end energy poverty. And I think that argument it's a nice tagline, but I don't think it's really been backed up by enough evidence and enough data and enough people in ministries of finance and planning believing that. And I would, I've been having a lot of conversations recently with the team at the Oxford Poverty and Human Development Institute, the people who did the multidimensional index on poverty. Of their 10 dimensions of poverty, the one that is the most accurate predictor of multidimensional poverty is lack of electrification. But it's still seen too much as sort of this sort of infrastructure play and not really something that's fundamental to human well-being. So I think there's a lot of different failures of imagination that we need to be working on.
That's great, Ashwin. I mean, those are, we could spend the next 2 days working through each of those 4 challenges that you've highlighted: the incumbent mindset, the binary thinking, distorted cost profiles, and then of course our inability to think through the linkages between SDG goal 7 and SDG goal everything else. But then let me turn to Henrik first. When you hear these propositions that there is this challenge of the binary, there is a challenge of distorted costs and subsidies, where does financing of distributed energy come in then? I mean, is there a lack of imagination around financing, or is there new imagination around financing happening? Henrik?
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I would turn the financing side. Also, a lot of things have happened along the way that I think also you mentioned in the opening remarks. As the sector has started out very much in a clear development space, filling a gap, serving the bottom of the pyramid, and maturing much more into, let's say, in the solar home system, into a consumer space, but also on the bigger system, mini grids, into something that is really something that is not just filling the gap, but as Ashwin also said, is basically fighting out a space, a coexistence with a grid, and this conflict that was perceived in the beginning is becoming, I think it's becoming solved in many people's minds. So it's not so much anymore just the pure concessional play of trying to find in something that has difficulties to stand on its own commercial feet, but still a high development justification. So a lot of commercial finance and also development bank financing has actually been flushing into the system into the sector over the last decades, which is very positive. It is, and I think that would be picking up this what you mentioned just in the question now to me, this compartmentalized thinking, that you have an energy pocket or an energy program trying to do something for energy, for this SDG 3, and then you have another compartment looking at health, looking at education. And I think that's now also the big opportunity of bringing those streams together, where the crisis actually is a catalyzing element of seeing energy also as a key element to improve the resilience of the health sector, of the education sector. I think that's where it comes together. There could always be more imagination on the side of financing. I think we have a toolbox that works by and large. And now to close, I think the big interesting question and challenge is how to link this toolbox to the big influx, hopefully big influx of stimulus money that is coming, and to make sure that this really puts the decentralized energy sector in the place where it belongs, in this build back better and sustainable economic growth context.
That's great. In fact, in my next round, I'm going to come back to you, Hendrik, and Ashwin and Radhika, both of you, because the three of you have highlighted this kind of the urgency of what the pandemic is throwing up in terms of energy access on one side and the economic recovery on the other. And if we could link the two, maybe new opportunities for financing come. But let's save that question for a bit. Let me turn to Jagjit. You represent, Jagjit, the International Solar Alliance. It has more than 80 member countries, many of whom have very strong solar potential, many of whom have very poor energy access metrics. Where does international cooperation fit in terms of reimagining or imagining a different future for distributed energy? Jagjit. Could you unmute yourself, Jagjit?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Arnaba, for framing the way you're framed, crisis of imagination and COVID crisis, and how we bring this decentralized energy question. So let me start with crisis of imagination and the way we are trying to think a bit out of the box at International Solar Alliance. As you rightly updated, we have more than 80 member countries, primarily LDCs in Africa and island countries in both Caribbean and Pacific. When we look at numbers, which we all know, if we stay on business as usual scenario, about 650 million people would have no access to electricity, primarily in Africa. And if you look at the countries, the problem is more in 12 countries, right. And it's more acute in some more than others. And then you say, okay, where's this market of off-grid solar going? If you look at GOGLA studies, SMAP studies, and a few other market studies, they're growing at about 10%. For last few years, you take their projections, they want to grow about 7 to 8% CAGR for next 10 years, the decade we are talking about, where we need to solve this. Even if you take the high end of the growth, still you would have 250 million people without access to electricity. Yeah, I'm not even going whether of the 400 they will tackle, whether they have tier 3 or tier 4 access to electricity. We are still talking about them getting tier 1, tier 2, one solar line or something else. So we are giving them basic, bare minimum, or rather just to survive. But still you have 250 million people without access to electricity. So the way we started looking at this issue is, it has to be looked at the way, vaccine people looked at advanced market commitments. Take it in a way as a social problem and public good, and we need to throw some money at it, but money at it in a very intelligent way. So borrowing from the health sector, what our DG thought, let's start aggregation model. And some of you have been working with us. So what we do is we pool demand, and we throw international price tenders, global corporates, aggregators, they bid. And we have done one price discovery tender in solar water pumps, and the prices discovered of the 300,000 pumps put on tender are about 30 to 40% lower than the prevailing prices in Africa. So the next tender we are going to go ahead is solar home system for about 47 million households, 5 people in one household that's taking care of 250 over a 4-year period, 4 to 5 year period. And essentially the idea is, let's bring governments in and let them own this demand and let private sector respond to this big demand. And our hope is, having learned some lessons from our water tender or from Gavi, that the prices those would be discovered would be lower than the prevailing price. And what does that do to markets? It creates a big demand to begin with. Our role is to bring governments to work on the taxes. If you look at the price structure of the solar home system, the cost of the product, the real product, is just about 1/3. 1/3 is then taxes, and then the rest is maintenance cost and overheads and this and that. So at Solar Alliance, what we're trying to do is get a commitment from governments that if you work with us on this tender and the prices are discovered pretty low, you're going to waive off the taxes. And you would procure them in bulk. But the question still remains, would they have the money to buy this? Would they have the large enough subsidies? That's where the partnership you're talking about under the ISA umbrella comes in. So we're engaging with all multilateral and bilateral financial institutions plus donors to say, okay, guys, earlier you may have to pump in $10 billion to solve this problem. What now we are offering is just a $5 billion problem. Could you face it for 5 years and start putting 1 billion together? And that's where this problem becomes much more manageable. So that's the kind of imaginative solutions we are trying to work out. Now, let me connect it to the COVID crisis and where they both marry. So as people say, crisis is too important to be lost. There is always an opportunity. And I think as Henrik talked about, in the health sector, marrying off-grid solar with health, I think there is a big opportunity. In the bank I come from, World Bank, there is a lot of reprogramming of IDA loans happening to see if in health kind of concessional loan provisions now we can bring solar solutions. Again, let me throw in some number. 1 in 4 healthcare centers in Africa don't have any access to electricity. Of the health centers which have electricity, only 25% reliable electricity. So what at ISA we are trying to do is put together what we call ISA Cares initiative, essentially to electrify with solar at least 1 primary healthcare center in each district of our membership. And we hope that with this test case, donors would get excited along with multilateral banks, and we may be able to electrify all the primary healthcare centers. Our value would be bulk procurement, bring the price down, get commitments from governments to lower the peripheral things which add up to the price, and bring all kind of players, foundation, multilateral, traditional donors, to treat this as an aid, as a real vaccine kind of a problem, and pump in some grant money with a real value add. Let me pause here.
Thank you, Jagjeet. That really, the solar pumps tender, the new tender, upcoming tender for solar home systems, and now for the community energy for primary health centers, all sound very exciting, because that was very much the proposition of the International Solar Alliance. I've been engaged with it since well before inception. The idea was to aggregate demand and offer a much larger market that was sort of sitting under the noses of the investors, but always getting missed. But let me turn back to you, Radhika. On this panel, apart from you, there is someone representing a philanthropic institution, someone representing an international organization, but also with a background from multilateral development banks, and you have someone from a development bank, a multilateral development bank. Now, as a representative of the private sector, trying to create and build and deepen markets in the distributed energy space, which of these three would you turn to in a crisis? And could you tell us a little bit more about how the crisis is affecting you?
Yeah.
And what is your plans to get out of it?
Yeah. Gosh, you're forcing me to choose just one person to turn to. Maybe I'll rephrase it. Who would I go to first? Yeah. I think Hendrik, honestly. I think the development finance institution, really critical right now. So, and I will back that by saying development finance institutions have been really quick to step in and converse with our industry to figure out how to keep us floating across these next few months. And let me explain a little bit more. About half of our business is a pay-as-you-go business. So we sell about half of our solar home systems and portable lamps through a technology-enabled platform that allows our customers to pay for the product in small installments over time, which addresses a lot of the affordability challenges of the consumers that we're trying to reach. The pay-as-you-go business model has really accelerated adoption of distributed energy systems, particularly in East Africa, where mobile money is really prevalent. And in the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, it's been one of the largest sort of changers in our industry. We're seeing this huge shift of consumers moving from smaller systems to larger systems because they now have financing. And that's tremendous. And that's what I think our industry has been banking on for the continued growth across the next 5 years or 10 years and so on. And in this moment, because of all the challenges with COVID, people can't necessarily make their payments. In some cases, in Nigeria, where mobile money is not prevalent, we actually are dependent on people meeting. Our customers have to meet our agents, or agents have to go to our customers to collect money. And so even if our customers have money to continue paying, there's just a roadblock right there, as there are for countless other industries across the world. And then in markets where customers are paying through mobile money, their income may start to take a huge hit. Luckily, we've not seen a huge hit just yet in Kenya and Uganda, Tanzania. But we are financing huge books of receivables, and we just don't have, our industry, Greenlight included, but I'll speak on behalf of our peers, we don't have the cash flow to sort of float, 3 months or 6 months of huge hits to our receivables, to our collections. And that could just, the worst case scenario, we could just crumble immediately, not because customers don't want to pay, but because they actually physically cannot pay. And so that's where we as an industry actually came together, a bunch of peers, competitors, investors, and started to think about what can we do? And one, I think, beautiful shining light has been how quickly the DFIs, I don't usually say DFIs moving quickly in the same sentence, but how quickly the development finance community has really come together to put this sort of a quick interim fund together for the distributed energy sector. And that's been, it's just getting started. Companies are now starting to apply for funding, but that's been tremendously helpful. So I would say, if this sort of crisis comes again, absolutely, this is likely where our industry is going to go first, to quickly put a Band-Aid in place, because we think this is temporary. This is a temporary cash flow challenge. We know people need our products. We think that the demand for our products may even increase as people, kind of come back to some sort of normal. But or a new normal, I should say, but it's really critical that our industry can survive the next X number of months, where sort of cash flow or sort of cash in business as normal is disrupted, or is likely to be pretty disrupted. Yeah, I wouldn't leave the other two of you out. I think then, after this sort of immediate Band-Aid, I think the sort of the need to work more and more with governments is increasingly clear in our industry. And we're seeing more successful examples of this popping up, which 5 years ago, even 2 years ago, didn't really exist in our industry. So, so that's where I would go longer term, but near term, I would go DFI.
In fact, let me turn that question to the other three on the panel, because what's missing on the panel is, representation from government. And the reason I say this is that, the kind of crisis or challenge that Radhika is describing is a challenge that any small business is facing, right? It's a crisis of cash flow. You have known demand, you have a customer base, you have a history of delivering reasonably good service, and there is willingness to pay. And because people, as Ashwin was realizing, at least people realize the links between energy and the rest of their developmental options, even if economists always don't make that connect. So when governments are putting out big stimulus packages for the sort of larger sector of micro, small, and medium enterprises, when governments are using their stimulus packages to bail out utilities, power utilities, is there a role for government to more specifically target some attention towards shoring up this particular sector? Not just because you're saving an individual business or giving it a bridge loan, but because of all the other connects it has to development. Any thoughts on that? Any one of you can come in on this.
I'm happy to step in, Arnaba. I mean,
sure.
Yeah, short answer is absolutely yes. The question is, what's the sort of right sequencing? I mean, to get to the point that Radhika was making, and nimbleness, I'm not sure that's one thing that governments may not be as solid on. And I do think the immediate priority is actually securing the sector in order for it to then have a foundation for future growth. So, the things that are happening with this off-grid debt relief fund that's being driven out of a group in Nairobi, and Acumen and Persistent and others, which we're also involved with. I think the point that Jagjit was making around really looking at ways to link to the sort of energizing health work, because not only is that dealing with the health resilience, it's also providing a channel for off-grid developers and mini grid developers to deploy assets and kind of continue, sort of moving their supply chains and their operations forward. We're going to have to look at the customer side as well. In India, we operate with about 270 mini grids with 5 or 6 different companies, and the question is, are these small and micro enterprises that are connected to these mini grids, are they just in a moment of a cash flow crisis, or are they also going to become lapsed businesses? And therefore, what is the stimulus that's needed for the SME sector in general? And then to what extent can you create a kind of DRE vertical within that, both for the DRE sector, but also for the small businesses that are around them in terms of the ecosystem that supports that either relies on the DRE sector as a source of energy, or is part of the supply chain. So I absolutely think that there's a role for government in recognizing that as a vital sector, because it's an opportunity to rethink distributed economic development, not just distributed energy, right? What is going to drive local job creation? You have tens of millions of migrants returning to rural India, who may not want to immediately go back to the city. They've been through a harrowing experience, and I think people are rethinking what does it mean to be an urban migrant? So there's going to be a massive need for jobs and livelihood generation in rural India. And I think putting the DRE sector sort of at the heart of that in terms of the kind of construction, installation activities that can be generated. And it's such a valuable proposition, because while it can help you overcome the immediate livelihoods crisis and jobs crisis and cash flow crisis, it's also addressing all of those medium and long-term issues that we care deeply about. It's also addressing the question of moving to a smarter grid, a more resilient grid, providing more reliable energy, and ultimately also linking you into the questions around climate change and what's the future energy mix you want, because the low energy customers of today are going to be the high energy customers of the future. So we are absolutely of the belief and conviction that as long as the DRE sector can be secured and can be stabilized, and we don't start seeing companies failing, that this needs to be positioned with governments and with DFIs and with donors as a major opportunity in terms of an economic recovery, an inclusive economic recovery.
In fact, you've stolen the question that I was going to ask you next about the links between distributed energy provision and the opportunity to shore up or create entirely new businesses, not just on the supply side, but on the demand side, the MSMEs in the rural economy. I mean, even if 10% of India's migrant labor did not go back to the cities, right? We're talking about maybe 30 million more people looking for gainful employment in the villages or having to create their own enterprises. One of the things we have done at CW is kicked off a program called Powering Livelihoods to try and help these companies that have already got proven technologies. They've crossed the technological valley of death, but need that enough scale to get through the commercial valley of death before they attract regular financing from banks, especially when they're servicing the rural economy. But when you create those income generating activities, there's even more willingness to pay because there's an even more direct connect between the energy access on one hand and the ability to get more income into the household. So therefore, let me now turn to Hendrik and Jagjit again. Let's look a little bit beyond the crisis. I liked Radhika's kind of optimism that this is a short-term cash flow problem. This is something that might last for 5 or 6 months. Let's take it as 2 or 3 quarters, right? But there is a world beyond that. And where do you think distributed energy is going to go in that world? One of the questions that has come up from one of the listeners, very interesting, that as households get electrified, the really interesting dynamic will be the uptick in overall energy demand. It's kind of, you taste blood once and then you want more of it, which is why even metrics of energy access, Jagjit, you were referring to tier 1, tier 2, that's exactly the point, that it's a dynamic, it's an evolving metric of what energy access really means between today and what it will mean 10 years from now. So when that second wave, when a third wave of rising energy demand comes, what is the potential for distributed energy to fill that demand? The questioner specifically asks, the use of Internet of Things and new technology. If distributed energy can tap into that next surge of demand, then it can truly become sustainable. Do you think that's possible, or do you think it will still compete on the margins? Who wants to go first? Hendrik? Jagjit, go ahead.
Yeah, let me try to respond to the points you raised earlier and this point. So in terms of the membership we have, which are more LDCs in Africa and SIDS, there is no economic stimulus coming. So one could forget about reviving their SMEs, or whatever is lost, you save your life if you can, kind of a scenario. That's where I think the DFIs and bilateral financial institutions, which are trying to reprogram now, and I think that become very important. So what we've been trying to do with SG's office, their new envoy on climate, with SC for All and others, to drumbeat that in all the restructuring or new money that would be pumped in now, we should also think about this issue more centrally in terms of energy, while marrying it with health, but beyond as well, so that these things have a hope to survive and then move forward. So that's point one, and we need to look at these external public flows for LDCs and SIDS more carefully and see if that could be the stimulus which could take us over the hump and then expand the distributed. I'm talking about more solar here. Sure. The second question related point is the whole refugee or FCV countries, the conflict prone or refugee areas, and where Corona is about to hit and people are worried about big panic. and mass casualties in Syria, in parts of Africa. And there, I think the opportunity again is to work with the existing humanitarian assistance agencies, UNHCR and others, to see how best we could promote these decentralized energy solutions now, where again, there's a lot of donor interest is there, donor money is coming around to take care of those segments of populations in FCV countries. In fact, we are trying to work out some analytics with EIB and later maybe a lending towards these FCV segments. And that's another pocket where we need to look very carefully in the whole COVID world. Then as we go post-COVID, I would say, again, our perspective on this is that, we need to get governments going in this in a big way. They need to prioritize these. They need to come clearly with, their mini-grid policies, off-grid support incentives. Unless that happens, private sector efforts, no matter how great they are and essential they are, would not really solve the problem. So I think we need to somehow get this compact again back, where governments and private sector agree on a set of reforms they need to do. Climate change somehow ends up as energy transition agenda in major economies, and energy access becomes a stepchild in that debate. And we need to bring it. See, our effort has been bring SDG 13 and 7 together in climate debate. It shouldn't happen that SDG 7 becomes a second child, and you only look at it from broader poverty reduction imperatives, but not as climate. So I think for long term, we need to bring that together, and maybe COP26 in K gives us that opportunity to bring it again together and drumbeat about it. UN has broadly taken energy access as a theme for the year. So there are various opportunities where we see to move governments in a big consortium with private sector foundations and others. Let me pause here for now.
Sure. Henrik, the opportunities with future technologies to tap into the new demand?
Yes, and I think that's actually a very intriguing aspect, because and it also hits a bit the heart of the challenge that the mini grids, of course, we don't finance mini grids, let's say, with the full aspiration of only powering a few lights, maybe an egg incubator and these kind of things. The full value will unfold when productive use really picks up, which is the big challenge of most of the mini grid operators, to set up already a big part of the infrastructure first, hoping and working towards a future with a lot more demand, productive use. And that's also where there is a role for development finance and also donors to take part of this risk and to bridge this very difficult journey where you pick your side, you make your bet basically. Few mini grids, many mini grids hopefully will thrive, others will not make it. Mm-hmm. And the target picture is, of course, and I think there's with new technology developing, and also with from the experience of mini grids that are working very well at the moment, that it is very much possible to develop, let's say, a grid that starts out in a very rudimentary basis into something that, as development kicks in the setting of the mini grid, can serve much higher loads, can also be instrumental in enabling this kind of economic development. So, I mean, yeah, looking beyond the crisis, I think that's the big challenge, especially for the mini grid part, to as far as banks and also donors are concerned, to basically provide the kind of products that can absorb some of the risk in their journey, and also to help those mini grid operators and developers that really holistically tackle this challenge beyond the technical difficulties of basically embrace the challenge of cultivating sustainable energy demand. We pause here.
So now, let me go a little bit in reverse order and come back to you again, Henrik. If I saw a lot of head nodding around this notion of the DFI's role to try and de-risk some of these investments or provide some of the backing. And in principle, we all seem to agree with that, because the belief is that that role of public money or DFI money can help to crowd in a lot of private investment. The question is, in reality, what is, I mean, Jagjit made a very important point about, the need for policies, specific policies around distributed energy, etc. What else will have to go into this recipe that that will require the DFIs coming up with the guarantees or the backstop? Maybe there's a policy. Maybe, of course, companies like Greenlight Planet need to be, of course, available on the ground. But demand will keep surging. So unless we are able to serve that demand, and rapidly so, it'll get served by somebody else. So describe to us the recipe that will help us scale this up faster.
Well, just to offer a few thoughts, not to take too much time on this, as I know that the other panelists will have much to offer there as well. I think, as Ashwin mentioned before, I mean, there is still a big viability challenge in many of the settings. So based on current demand, based on current technology, it's very difficult to get to cost-reflective tariffs below $1, or even that would be very difficult. So it's hugely expensive still, especially at the outset, if you look at micro picogrids. So there is a need or an opportunity also to structure at a higher level, not just from one pilot to the next one, but at an aggregate level, at a country level programs, concession type or whatever it is, that allows to bring in private financing, maybe DFI, also grants, in a way that buy down the cost a bit and allow to offer a tariff to end consumers that is halfway affordable. So that would be, I think, the first phase to in the recipe, to move a bit from a pilot here, pilot there, into something that's bigger, to mobilize bigger amounts, and to also allow for a certain degree of standardization that can be found with some mini-grid operators already, but which is really critical to bring down the cost. And then the other part, the big part, is to tap into the dormant demand and the demand that can be developed. I don't think that anybody else would necessarily serve it. It's really the challenge of the decentralized utility to be instrumental in developing that. Big partnerships are needed with other organizations. Health and education is often mentioned, local industries. It's a difficult recipe, unfortunately, but yeah, let me pause here.
Ashwin, let me jump to you before I come back to Jagjit and Radhika. As a philanthropic organization, you have the ability to just bet on new ideas, which, if they gain scale or demonstrate sufficient proof of concept, can evolve into something commercial. So you mentioned the role of MSMEs and the linkage to energy supply earlier. Jagjit mentioned the role of advanced market commitments to aggregate demand. And so in that imagination of how to scale this up, are there some new ideas that you're piloting or thinking about? You're kind of a venture capitalist for ideas. So what other ideas are you considering?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these ideas are things that people have been mentioning. I don't think any one organization is going to sort of lead the charge. I mean, I think at the end of the day, there are 3 or 4 things that we're working on, but very much in partnership with others. The first is the whole idea of integrated electrification and energy planning, right? The idea, and this speaks to the question of regulations and a belief at the highest level that we can do this quicker, cheaper, and more impactfully if national governments and other energy investors and planners actually look at the best fit and the best combination of technologies. It's not a competition between grid, mini grid, and off grid. It's that integration. So at the very highest level, just working on that, and we put together a global commission on ending energy poverty last year that was sort of really at the center of it is this notion of how do you really get integrated distribution frameworks in which off grid and mini grids play the part that they should be if you look at all of the data, right? If you look at all the reports, ESMAP comes out with a report and says 490 million people should be electrified by off-grid and mini-grid solutions. Great. So how do we move from desktop to the field in terms of unlocking that reality? And part of it is that. The second thing, which hasn't come up a lot today, is the role of sort of further technology innovation. I think we've all ridden a positive wave in terms of some of the big technology prices that have come down, whether it's PV or batteries, storage, etc. But for the mini grid sector in particular, there's still a lot more to be done in terms of optimization, advanced market commitments. So it's not pure R&D, but a lot of these technologies are not being developed with the off-grid sector in mind. And the question is, how do you then adapt and apply them? And can you then link that to larger procurements? The great example of the power of scale when we were entering into this partnership with Tata Power in India, when they decided to really get into off-grid and mini-grid electrification at large scale, when we were doing the financial modeling, all they had to do was make a phone call to a supplier and say, if we ordered 2,000 of these, what price would we get? Boom, right. We suddenly saw a 1% uptick in the IRR. And I know those are just paper exercises, but it's about leadership as well and a willingness to kind of step up and kind of make the market. On finance, I just say we are big believers that the viability gap is there. It needs to be filled. SE for All and Damilola and her team are sort of leading the charge on this notion of a universal energy or electrification fund. Many of the private players who are at the forefront of understanding the gaps, folks like PowerGen in Africa and others, Cross Boundary, all these guys, they understand that for their businesses to thrive, they're going to need, anywhere between 20 to 40% concessional subsidy capital. And how do we won't get that if we don't get that overall integrated thinking adopted. And then there is the demand piece. Well, one of the exciting things that's happening with players like the World Bank, is they are really now starting to try and operationalize notions of livelihood and energy nexus, ag energy nexus. We've been hearing these terms for a long time, but how do you actually converge investments? So we're partnering with the World Bank on a couple of efforts in Africa around this to really bring the agriculture and energy planning together. And in fact, the off-grid electrification in Ethiopia, I think, will be driven by the ag sector and by the leadership being shown by the Agricultural Transformation Agency there, rather than by the Ministry of Energy on its own. So, this is beginning to move. We're moving to a world in which integrated rural development, which we used to talk about in the 70s, is actually being enabled today by the kinds of technologies and data that we have at our disposal, whereas in the past it was just rhetoric.
Great. We have just about 6-7 minutes left. So let me turn back to you, Radhika and Jagjit. Reflecting on the same question, I mean, you've heard on the financial innovation side, policy innovation side, and tech innovation side. What does that mean for you as a business? How much time do you even have to innovate on the product or the service that you're offering versus scaling up what you have? And equally, Jagjit, when you're looking at these really small countries, not so much fiscal room, and you are trying to aggregate demand, you're aggregating demand for the very basic energy solutions right now. Is there a way to get them to even think about the potentially bright future for applying new technologies and scaling up operations on the productive energy side? Maybe Radhika first and then Jagjit.
Sure. One thing that was in my mind is in the last few minutes was, do we really need a lot of innovation in financing to scale? When I think about the harder to reach segments and markets, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, there's, think about DRC, Mozambique, West Africa, Francophone West Africa, a lot of the underpenetrated markets where the really successful models from Kenya, from Uganda, Tanzania, a few other markets in the world have not yet proliferated and are not, at this pace of just sort of like coasting acceleration like we see in Kenya, what's stopping that? And there's a number of things stopping that. I think the nascency of the industry, the lack of consumer awareness, but some of it is just the sheer challenge to scale in vastly different markets than some of the easier to start in countries. And the other reality is when companies like ours get to a certain stage where things are working, we're far past those early startup years, proof of concept. One of our biggest battles is making sure we're financially sustainable. We are financially sustainable, but the decisions that we make about where do we step next and scale next, that financial sustainability factors significantly into those decisions, largely because of the pressure that we have from our investors or debt investors, for example, right? We become less investable if we take some big risks that prove to be far more challenging than we had anticipated. And I think that's the reality when we think about that under-addressed or unaddressed market. And Jagdeep, you rightly pointed out that if we go at this status quo, there's hundreds of millions of people. 250 million, I think, is really generous. Actually, it's probably much larger that are just not going to see our solutions. And these are real business challenges. It's not that easy for us to jump. And so coming back to that, my sort of plea for let's not try to get too sexy in the financial model, the financial side of let's recognize that some places are just really difficult. And we're going to need a lot of de-risking agents to pull us into some of these harder to serve markets. And that's, it can be a combination of things, but just that upfront, we think this could work, we feel pretty confident, but if things don't work, what is the risk to our core business? If that equation doesn't balance out, we're unlikely to go there. And that's true of any of our competitors, of our peers in this sector. So I think that's one request I'd say back to the DFI world is let's just take what works and acknowledge what the areas that are more challenging and just let's not get too complicated about how we think about scaling. I think there's kind a time and place for creative innovative financing, but I think the real scale, we actually probably just need some really easy answers there. Yeah.
So Jagjeet, last word to you. We've got maybe a couple of minutes. So Radhika is saying let's not get ahead of ourselves. There's still a lot of energy poor people who need some basic solutions, and let's just make sure there's the financing and the demand aggregation that helps to deliver that bare minimum. What's your thought? Is the International Solar Alliance trying to deliver at that end, or trying to scale up innovations at a different end of the spectrum?
I couldn't agree more with her. The problem is huge. We need to address both financial and non-financial barriers. Just to kind of summarize, we'll make 3 quick points. So, as Ashwin was saying, we're doing that approach. Link it with sectors. So we have this, scaling solar in agriculture programs, solarizing the whole pump set. Second is solarizing the cold chains. Third is solarizing health. So if you start taking this kind of more horizontal approaches, you tee up yourselves with the right line ministries who actually have to take this forward. And that makes it much more interesting and sustainable. So that's point number 1. The second is the capacity of these institutions, the governments, the ministries, their implementing entity to actually take it forward. So at ISA, what we are trying to do is we've started at all ends of it. We have now master's program for mid-career government professionals from our member countries. One is an MBA program, second is an MTech. We are starting an undergrad program, solar technologies, and modifying Indian Surya Mitra experience and training those private sector and entrepreneurs and technicians in big scale, and then also training master trainers. So at the scale we are going, if we multiply by 5 and take it to next 5 years, I think we would have trained like 15,000 people who are actually going to make a difference in these markets and make them scaled up and sustainable. And third point, which is
sorry, Jagjeet, I know you have a third point, but the organizers are telling me to wrap up because they've got to get the next panel in. But you are still ending on a pretty strong note. And I think what we've basically heard is there's a lot to do in terms of filling the energy gap that's still there. But there's also a lot of this innovation happening in philanthropic foundations, in international organizations, and in the development finance institutions. So as long as we all kept coming together in real life or virtually, I think there's a lot to achieve. Thank you so much for all of you who listened in, and thank you to the panelists for a great conversation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for this session. The energy track will be back tomorrow, so please tune in. We will kick off with a session on coronavirus as a communication strategy from 4 to 5 p.m., followed by clean cooking solutions from 5 to 6 p.m., and close with the future of green transport from 6 to 7 p.m. This evening, please join us for a plenary session on how do we transform our COVID response to cater to the most vulnerable. This session is with Nobel laureate Kailash Satyarthi, Anita Bhatia from UN Women, and Dalberg will be presenting its new field study. So do join us. Thank you, everyone.
Hey Nagis, can you please share your screen with the tomorrow's agenda?
I would like to invite Gaurav to introduce the session as well as Kailash Satyarthi. Gaurav is the Asia Director of Dalberg Advisors. He advises clients on how to maximize social impact. Gaurav, over to you